You complicate life by planting trees. And in addition to doing things that are useless, you also do things that sometimes actually endanger the survival of the tree. Alright, new planting tutorial video today. It's the right season. I'm going to show you the simplest and most effective way to plant a tree. I'll show you 3 common mistakes many make that waste time and energy and are totally useless. Let's begin. So what I'm going to show you today applies no matter what type of tree it is, whether it's a fruit tree, an ornamental tree, or anything else, it works. Today I'm going to show you on a bare root tree. But for potted trees, it will be exactly the same method. You just won't need to coat or smear the roots with soil. But other than that, it's exactly the same thing. As for equipment, you'll need a hoe, a fork, or possibly a broad fork, and of course a tree and maybe even an apron. All right, we're ready and we're going to start. The first mistake that many of you make is the way you dig the hole. Usually you make a hole that's way too big. The hole should only be the size of the root system you're planting, or the size of the pot if it's a potted tree. There's no need to make it any bigger. After planting, loosen the soil around it to help the roots grow. You don't need to make a bigger hole, right? You'll see as you go along. Why? However, before planting, we're going to prepare. Here, I'm going to plant in an area with grass, so we'll start by removing the grass. Within about 50 centimeters of where the tree emerges, there you go. Now we have a hole that's about the size and depth of the root. No need to make it bigger, no need to make it deeper. You'll exhaust yourself for no reason and nothing will change. For the tree to grow well, however, what you'll need to do after planting is loosen the soil around it so that later the roots can grow more easily, and you'll do that with a fork or a broad fork. Once we're done, well, now that we're at this point, it's not finished yet. We're still going to loosen the soil a bit deeper so that we can push the root in a little further. Any order we want. Either we water and then plant, or we plant and then water. It doesn't matter much here, but our approach might change slightly. Let me show you. Before putting the tree in, I loosened the bottom of the hole with a fork, which allows the roots to go a little deeper than the size of the hole I originally made. Once there's plenty of loose soil at the hole's bottom, I fill it with water, then add my root. And tamp the soil a bit around the roots so that the soil really sticks well to the roots. That replaces root dipping, which I don't find necessary. I even made a video sharing all my thoughts on root dipping. I'll put a link in the top right if you want to watch it. There's one case where you shouldn't mix the soil too much either. That's if you have soil that's too clayey. That being said, if you have very clayey soil that doesn't contain much organic matter, it may not be ready for a tree yet, but that's another story. Once the soil is packed around the roots, we'll refill the hole with soil that we took out. For planting, that's it. Some of you might think, but I add compost at the bottom to feed the tree. Second mistake, and here's why. In short, the procedure is complete. Make a hole that's no bigger than the root. There's no need for more. I loosen the soil underneath. I plant and I water, or I water and then plant, whichever you prefer. Press the soil against the roots, fill the hole back in with the soil, and maybe later on the surface. I'm adding compost, quality potting soil, and well-decomposed manure, but not in the hole, since it's not only useless, but could harm the tree. I'll explain to you why there's a risk. If you put manure that's too fresh or compost that's too rich in organic matter, nitrogen, fertilizer and nutrients, sure, it's good, but putting that in contact with the young roots of the tree could burn the roots. So, okay, it won't necessarily kill the tree, but it definitely won't do it any good. And what's certain is that there's no point in doing it in the first place. You should know that a tree isn't as demanding as a vegetable plant, like a tomato or zucchini plant. A tree just isn't nearly as demanding as that. Also, the tree is dormant now and doesn't need feeding, unlike the tomato plant you'll plant in spring, which will be growing actively. So, providing food that's already available around the roots for the tree is pointless right now at the time of planting. It will need it later in the spring when it really starts to grow. Also, fertilizing materials in soil are mobile and don't stay in one place, so where will they move? In general, they won't go up, they'll go down, they'll go down. With the water you use for watering, or with the rain that will fall all winter, so in the spring, when the tree is just starting up, the food that's around the root will have long since moved further down, which is why it's important to put the food on top. In nature, organic matter arrives on the soil in winter, leaves fall on the ground all winter, they slowly decompose, and in the spring, when the fertilizing materials are available, they're in this decomposed organic matter. The rains will carry that down into the soil below, where the roots are, and that's where the roots will be able to feed properly. Sorry for the long explanation, but I hope you now understand why food should go around the root. It's pointless, but you should put it on the soil surface. All right, now, another point to pay attention to once the tree is well planted, whether you put compost or not. Personally, in this case, I won't necessarily add any. We check that the tree is at the right depth. When the collar is at ground level, the collar is the boundary between the root parts and the above ground parts. For a grafted tree, always keep the graft point above ground, never bury it. That could have been another mistake, but you usually know that. I'll use this chance to discuss something I sometimes notice: people who bury. At the time of planting, a pipe that goes down to the roots through which you can water the roots directly to save water. If you've followed what we've seen so far, sending pure water directly to the roots. If water doesn't pass through the soil, it won't deliver enough nutrients to the roots, which isn't what the tree needs. Another thing to know is that here we're going to loosen the soil around the roots so the roots can develop. And as soon as the tree grows, most of the roots are around the tree, not just at the base of the tree. So placing a pipe to deliver water right under the trunk, for me it doesn't help much either. All right, now that I'm done, we're going to cover all this to prevent weeds from growing around the tree. That's really the worst thing that could happen. In terms of competition, we avoid grass. So for now, we'll put this. In my case, I prefer to say that this is temporary, and personally, I prefer to put in ground cover plants or a plant cover, green manure or something like that. But right now I don't have the time, so in the meantime, I mulch to prevent anything from growing. Mulching. The most interesting and nutritious options have woody elements like dead leaves and shredded green waste, while straw and hay are less appealing. Well, here, I put a little bit because I had some old straw on hand, but that's it. It's not really that interesting anymore. Putting woody things like dead leaves is what trees prefer because naturally that's how they work. All right, I'm done here. Maybe just one last thing. I'm sure at least one of you is thinking, aren't you going to put in a stake? That's the third mistake, often a double one. You'll see why, but you definitely shouldn't use a stake. Did you want something? No, nothing. I was just walking by and wanted to see the tree. Okay, weird. So be careful, there is a special case where you will need to use a stake. For example, if you're growing very dwarf trees, like an apple tree grafted onto M9, which is a very dwarfing rootstock. This creates a small root system that can't fully support the tree, especially if you are in a region where it's a bit windy. So for those very specific trees, yes, use a stake. In all other cases, no, don't use a stake. You should know that it's the movement the wind gives to trees, the fact that the trunk moves, that makes the tree strengthen its trunk and especially its root system to keep it standing. And so it's these regular winds that will strengthen the roots where they need to be strengthened. If you stake your tree, it won't move, so it thinks there's no wind and grows taller. You'll have to keep the stake in for the tree's entire life, or it will fall over in the first wind. If you're in a region where there's a lot of wind, one thing you could do is, for example, plant hedges around your property to limit the wind. But again, that's another story. And what if your tree is already too big when you plant it and it has a very small root system? Maybe you've made another mistake. That's why I said staking often covers up the mistake of buying a tree that's too large. If buying a tree from a nursery, choose whips, young grafted shoots, or trees that are 1 to 3 years old but not older. If you have too much above ground growth for a small root system, that's a mistake because there's too big a gap between the above ground parts and the roots. And that's not good at all for the stability and survival of the tree. Ideally, you should plant very young trees, whips, trees that are 1, 2, or 3 years old, not much older, so that there's a good balance between the roots and the above ground system. And if eventually you have a tree that's a bit too big, another solution can be to prune its above ground parts a little, so it catches less wind and can develop strong roots to stand upright without support. A stake. Trees are like children. If we support them too much when they're young, they'll struggle to support themselves when we remove that support. I know I'm not here to philosophize. I hope you found this video helpful and that it helps you avoid mistakes when planting trees. Just a quick note, our trees are now available for sale online. Visit the Le Jardin des Merveilles website or online sales page to see all we offer. Come on, share the video with people around you if you think it might interest others. Subscribe if you like what I do and give it a thumbs up. All that is nice, and you can also support me financially through the TP platform. And thanks to everyone who does it, who will do it, without whom I wouldn't be able to take the time to do all this. All right, thank you all. Happy planting and see you soon. Bye.